Hi, this is Dr. Kimberley Linert, and you're listening to Incredible Life Creator Podcast. My guest today is Joe Swinger. Joe Swinger is the founder and CEO of the Silver Linings Network, LLC, an organization that helps midlife adults make the second half of their life the best half by living the VIP life of vibrancy, impact, and purpose. He spent 30 years in retail leadership before leaving corporate jail in 2019 when he founded the Silver Linings Network Facebook group, a community of midlife adults over 40 years old. Joe is the author of Awaken the Magic Within, The 7 Essential Virtues for Incredible Success, and the upcoming children's book, The Bodacious Beans. He is also the host for recently launched the Silver Linings podcast. Leading from his own discoveries about pain, loss, and abuse, Joe engages his experiences in hard-won resiliency to position others towards freedom and success in their personal and professional relationships while in the second half of their life. Joe is a certified Jack Canfield Success Principles trainer and holds master's degrees in both psychology and business administration. He currently lives in Albuquerque, New Mexico. Welcome to the podcast, Joe.
Hey, thanks, Kimberly. It's a thrill to be on.
Yeah, so I'm excited to hear about your journey, where you started out, how you got to where you are today.
Yeah, so people like to ask me how I got into retail, and the thing is, so I left Chicago, where I was born, when I was 23. I was like a big loser. I flunked out of college, and I was kind of, I grew up in a dysfunctional home and labeled a loser, and so it was difficult. And then I left Chicago at 23 and moved to LA, and was homeless. And so, back then homeless was colorful, right? You were finding yourself. Not so much now. But I went up and down Sunset Boulevard, which was the place to go. At Sunset Boulevard, it's where all the action was. And then I went to Hollywood and Vine, and, it was not the best neighborhood. But I ended up getting a retail job pumping gas in Westwood, California. Now, anybody knows California, Southern Cal, Westwood is where UCLA is located. And even though I got a job pumping gas, I was homeless for quite a while. And I would go to UCLA on the intramural field and sleep on the field. And then I would go and use their weight room and go and use their gyms and showers. I don't think you could probably do that now. I think you need an ID card. But and just pumping gas, I realized how great I could be, because the owner told me after a couple of weeks on the job how much the gas volume had increased since I had been there. And so it showed me at that time, even though I didn't know what the heck I was doing, that it's just the work ethic. I didn't know any better. And so then I stayed in the automotive business for several years. I managed what people know as Goodyears and Firestones, and that while I went to UCLA, I got my grades up at a junior college, went to UCLA, got a bachelor's in psychology, and really still didn't know what I wanted to do. And so I got into the film business. If you're in LA, you got to get in the film business.
Right.
And I wrote a screenplay. I got some notoriety at UCLA. It was pretty hot. A couple of producers wanted to make it, but it didn't happen to get made. I had an opportunity at Disney there was a minority competition. They were starting a minority screenwriting competition. And I was told that I was the best script out of 600, but you can see I'm not a minority, and I did not get the position. So that kind of devastated me on the screenwriting. But I finally got out of the automotive business and got into the retail big box, what we know. This is with Circuit City before they went out of business. And I was a manager there for, about 14 years. And I realized I became known as the manager from hell. And if anybody's worked with a terrible boss, or what they call the bad boss, that was me. And I got great results, but somewhere along the line, they came up with these employee surveys. And I don't know if you've taken one. I'm sure, your listeners have. And I discovered that everybody hated me. And can you imagine finding out that people you thought you were doing a great job for and you were looking out for their best interests, that they all hated you? And I really had to think about what I was going to do to change, because first off, I didn't change, I was going to get fired. But second of all, that wasn't who I was. I was there for the people. And so I couldn't get promoted because they thought I had this attitude, which I did. But it was I discovered it came from my low self-esteem. I was very defensive. I wouldn't take people's suggestions. I always had to be right. You know how you're protecting your ego. Mm-hmm. And they sent me to Grand Junction to run a store for Christmas. They trusted me to get me out of town, right? And so I was lying in the hotel room and thinking about what the heck was I going to do? And I suddenly burst into tears. And I thought, I'm going to go to work the next day and be a motivational speaker. And I didn't know what a motivational speaker did at the time. But I went to work the next day, and that day thereafter, there to inspire people and not beat them up. Okay? Because I used to lead by fear and intimidation. And, a couple of years later, I got my own store and got, great engagement scores, great, extraordinary results. But it all started that day in the hotel room that I said, that's not who I am. And, I still get emotional when I think about it. And so that's the most important thing. If you want to get anything out of this, take inspired action, make a decisive decision, take inspired action, like I did when I left home in Chicago. And actually, there's a story to that. I stopped in Iowa, and I was eating lunch that a girlfriend made for me that, of course, I had to break up. And I was crying in the parking lot, thinking, what am I doing? And I was going on the freeway, and I was thinking, should I go back east to Chicago, or should I continue west to LA? And it dawned on me that if I went back home, I wouldn't amount to anything. And so those are one of those moments, and just like the hotel room in Grand Junction. And then as I got more into leadership, I wrote a couple books. The last one was Awaken the Magic Within. You can see it over my shoulder here. And it was all about my transformation and how I transformed from the manager from hell to an enlightened manager. And it was about those 7 essential virtues. And so that's basically the journey. And I got an MBA along the way and a master's in psychology that now I use with my coaching for business and personal development and that. Nice. That's a mouthful.
Yeah, it is. So how did you make the jump from, you said, corporate jail to what you're doing now?
Yeah, so it is corporate jail because, while I did a great job, for years, I hated it. I hated working for leaders that don't know what they're doing. I hate working for companies that don't know what they're doing and they don't walk the talk and they pretend to care about the associates and they don't. So it was very difficult. I had to go to work with a purpose, and my purpose was the people. But I had, some difficult times, but I made the jump in 2013 and I lost my house. And so you have that fear and that doubt and that worry that, wow, if I do it again, what's going to happen again? Because I lost my house. I finally got a part-time job that became a full-time job, and I got back into leadership. But that is the fear that holds a lot of people back. They hit that terror barrier and they bounce back and they won't take a risk on themselves. You'll stay at a company for 10 or 20 years, hoping and praying to get promoted, but you won't take a chance on yourself, or you'll give up in a month and go back looking for a job. And so the Silver Linings Network exists for people in the second half of life who want to make it their best half. So you could be in your 40s or 50s, retired in your 60s or 70s, but you're determined that your ideal your ideal dream and goals are not what you are living. You are not living a fulfilling life with a vibrant career and a passionate relationship and impacting others. So that's where the VIP comes from. And so 2019 in June, a year ago, I took the chance and I went in to give my notice, and I told the employer that I could either take a chance on you or I could take a chance on Joe. And guess which one I've chosen? and you know, I call it a corporate jail because anybody that has seen the movie Shawshank Redemption, you know, very famous movie, the character, one of the main characters, Red, talks about how people feel safe in the four walls of jail. Just like in corporate, you're an important person in there. People listen to you in there. You outside those four walls, you're a nobody. It's scary. And so when you leave the corporate environment, you no longer get the accolades. You don't have the people under you. You know, I had 200 people at one time, and you sit in your office and you think like, you know, what am I going to do? You know, you know what your vision is out there, but what are the day-to-days? You know, how do you build a calendar? How do you execute without a team? I was a rock star because I built rock star teams. And so that's why I call it corporate jail, because that is the way people think. Now, I'm not going to belittle everyone. There are people that they love doing that. That's their career. But for the people that something inside is eating away, knowing there's more to do, that voice that gets blocked out by the white noise of society and the media, when you're alone, that white voice or white noise that quiets down, and you say, Joe, you got to get going. You're turning 40, you're turning 50, you're turning 60. I'm in my 60s. And you like, wow, there's, you know, you don't know how much time is left. And so that's what I help people to listen to the voice, decide what do they want to do. And then, you know, if you're retiring in your 60s, you got 20 good years left. You know, what are you going to do? We can't travel now, you know? And this is the greatest opportunity for people to radically transform their life. You know, many of the people lost their jobs that didn't want to be there. And so that's really what I'm working on right now.
Beautiful. Yeah. And as you're talking about that, you know, jail or whatever. So jail can be anything where you're staying where you're not happy or you're not totally fulfilled. And I know we were talking about before we got on the podcast here that, you know, you have twin boys who are 23 now. I have 3 children in their 20s and now a granddaughter. And, you know, coming up to that point, a lot of times it was hard to actually change what you were doing because there was so many responsibilities and so much at stake that you kind of put, at least I know I did, I put what I wanted to the side while I was raising a family and taking care of everyone else. But, you know, in the last 5 years, I went back and I started an art, you know, doing an art class because that's what I wanted, you know. So now that my kids are older, I was thinking, okay, what do I want to do second? And that's how I ended up writing my book back in 2017. I'm like, okay, what am I doing second? Well, in second, I'm inspiring people. And, but I think a lot of people feel a little bit contained by whatever their responsibilities are. And as you get into your 40s and 50s, you actually are a lot freer to choose more of what you want to do.
Well, that is a great point. Yes, because obviously that's what kept me in corporate jail. I had a family. They're 23-year-olds, so they were youngsters. And so what's the answer? A lot of people say, I'm going to do this once the kids are grown, or I'm going to do this, I don't have time, I don't have money, I don't know how. Those are the main excuses in our business. And and I left in 2013. I lost my house because I didn't have a plan. I had the gumption that's like, I'm going to make this happen, but I didn't have a network. And so what can you be doing while you're earning that living? Because if you could bring some of that energy into another part of your life, you could go to work for money. You could tolerate it, especially if you have a big why. The kids are a big why.
Yeah.
So I started writing. My first book was published in 2005. I would go home every night. I would still be writing. I would still be planning what am I going to do? I started my coaching business part-time. So I didn't have, like they say, all the eggs in one basket. I still was developing Joe. And to let you know how long it takes sometimes, I said I was going to be a writer in 1983. I carried a pen just like this in my pocket in 1983. I was not published till 2005. So think of how many years that is. What is that, 22 years? Now, that's because we didn't have the publishing world we have now. It's much easier. Anybody can get published. In those days, you had to know what you were doing. But I still had a goal and a mission why I was going. But so that's what I would say to people, get a side hustle going. There is so much to work on to be great, kind of like what you're doing. How do you start Zooming? How do you do a Facebook Live? How do you build a community on Facebook? How do you even talk about coaching? How do you frame whatever you want to coach on? How do you frame it? If you want to write a book, how do you get your proposal going? You got to do the research. You got to do, you got to build your brand. You have to do online competition. If you just quit and go, you're at such a disadvantage. So the second time around, I had a lot of infrastructure built. I knew that was going to be the end of it. So, but here's the important thing. A lot of people say they're going to do it. The kids grow. They don't do it. They're stuck in a relationship. I'm going to stay with this spouse because we need the money now because of the kids. My mom was like that. She didn't get divorced for the kids. And then the kids grow and they still don't leave their spouse. They're in an abusive relationship. So those are the kind of things that you have to make a decision and a plan. So and I like to use the Olympics as an example. Somebody could be watching the Olympics and say, you know what, I'd like to be an Olympian. I could do that. The Olympics may be another 4 years, right? Because they alternate. So if you're watching the Summer Olympics, the next one's in 4 years, you could decide that day to be an Olympian, but that's a 4-year road. And you have to get in shape and you have to plan. And, just like if you're going to climb Mount Everest, you have to get in shape and things. So those are really the first steps to get out of, I call it corporate jail. It could be relationship jail. It could be, it could be self-limiting belief jail. We're not good enough. I can't do that. I have an imposter syndrome. I can't do what Kimberly's doing. Sure, she can do it. And that's what people think. And so there are so many things against us. And I'll tell you, this virus we're going through is the worst thing because it makes people regress. It gets people back into cocooning in their home and not taking risk. And so that's what they need to be doing, is taking some risk.
Exactly. Yeah. And when you're working with people like one-on-one, I found that some people are they're not even aware that they're unhappy. In other words, they've been in the same situation, whether it be relationship, job, whatever it is, they've been in that same thing for so long that it's so comfortable, but they don't realize that they can't understand why they're unhappy. But their awareness is so low. Is there anything that you take people through to actually help them become aware of which areas they would like to change?
I like what you're saying. I call that the divine discontent. You know, people are unfulfilled and they're unhappy, but they don't know why. It's kind of in psychology with anxiety. We used to call it free floating anxiety. It's like they're anxious, but they don't know why. And so I call that an invitation or an awakening, kind of like my book. It's actually called The Invitation, The Seven Essential Virtues. And that's because invitations come to us two ways. It could be like a brick over their head where we get divorced, there's a death in the family, we lose a job, and it's mandated that we have to change. Or it comes internally as a whisper that people experience just what you're saying. You wake up one day and it's like, I'm just not happy in this relationship. You know, you go to job and you sit in a parking lot like I used to, and it's like, I just don't want to go in. You know, and so if people come to us as a coach, they may not know why, but as when people go to a doctor, there's usually a symptom, you know, unless it's a wellness check. And so then you could explore, well, tell me where you are now, what's going on. And then you can kind of get like, where do they want to go? And then what have they tried? And typically, if you're asking a lot of questions and being a great listener, they're going to give you indications. You know, ask them, like, you know, tell me what brings joy in your life. You know, when's the last time you experienced gratitude, you know, or felt something joyous? And now in this pandemic, many people have dark energy and they don't know why. They just know they're not happy anymore. Mm-hmm. And, you know, the thing with this pandemic, they've taken away all the joy in people's lives. Going to a happy hour or a movie on a Friday night or doing something with their friends. And the reason it's important is that it's not just the event. It's not that you just go to a happy hour with your friends. It's that you look forward to it. Human beings like to look forward. They like to look forward to the weekend. They like to look forward to that vacation in 6 months. They like to, you know, hey, what are you going to wear? What do you want to do? Where do you want to go? And that's what's missing from people's lives. And because I took a business trip and I went to that bar for happy hour. And I'm telling you, it was horrible. I'm looking around suspiciously, you know, who's not wearing a mask? What are people coughing? And so it's asking questions of what people, what they want to do, what brings them joy, what did bring them joy when they were younger. You know, what do you want to be when you grew up? You know, those kind of things. That's a good first session. So I do that, and I'm sure you do it. You know, I give a free 45-minute planning session, but those people usually know what they're trying to do. Yours is, but your question is a little more in depth. Like they don't know what they want to do, you know?
Right. And a lot of people don't know what they want to do because they've pushed down their desires and what they wanted for so long. And even doing what I'm doing now, I had always not wanted to be the center of attention, not on a screen here. And, you know, it's just been the last few years that I remembered that there was this show on TV. I grew up in Michigan called PM Magazine, and these people would go around and show different interesting things around the community. And I thought, oh, I'd like to do that. But that got pushed way down until I just started thinking about that this year. And I'm like, oh, look what I'm doing. It still wanted to bubble to the surface. So if you can just be open and, like you said, take one step, just one step. So
yeah, and so I like to use the Wizard of Oz analogy. So Dorothy, she had everybody telling her, you know, to follow the old brick road, but her fear, even though maybe it was not expressed as fear, her reticence was not to go on the path. And then once she put that first foot on the yellow brick road, remember it was like the little tiny beginning, and then as she walked, it got bigger. So even though she didn't know how, the path opened up in front of her. But she took the first step, and she didn't know if that she was hoping the Emerald City was at the end, but on the path, it's scary, right? We had flying monkeys and witches and meeting strangers, and they had the poppies where she fell asleep. So the path is laden with obstacles, but you have to keep on pressing. And then, you know, what a beautiful ending as an author myself, to find out that she always had the power within her.
Mm-hmm.
That is all of us. The power is within us.
Yeah.
We have to awaken the magic, and it can come different ways to you, as it does to me. And you, like you said, listen to the stillness in your voice, and let it open up to you, because that's what's going to happen. And you know what? That's the beauty of it. That's the way it should happen, because that's when the great things happen. And imagine being 50 or 60 and not knowing what you want to do. I mean, it's a crime, because we were meant to live with joy and vibrancy and impact and purpose, no matter how big or small. And I don't mean a big purpose. You could spend time like you do with your grandkids, impact their lives. That's your purpose, if it was, and that's good enough.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, another thing I was thinking is, when you start taking steps forward, you can think of it kind of as one of those things like a corn maze, like a maze. So let's say you start going and you're taking steps and you go in the wrong direction and you run into a wall. Well, that's not, that's not the path. So what do? You just backtrack. If you're on a trip somewhere and you take a wrong turn, what do? You turn around and you just reassess where you're at and you take another direction. So doesn't have to be any fear in moving forward. Yes, could you end up in a dead end for a short time? Sure. But that doesn't mean you have to stay there.
Okay, so what I like about that is, if you've been in one of those Halloween mazes, right? Sometimes they have like scary monsters and things like that. But just like in a movie, there's always a guide. There's always, like in Star Wars, right? Luke Skywalker had Obi-Wan Kenobi or whatever, whatever they had. So there's always somebody in a maze that says, why don't you try this way? And that's what coaches are for and mentors are for. And that's why I tell people, I could give you a plan and try to give you a 12-week plan. But the reason one needs coaches or mentors is that we run into these obstacles, or you have a bad day, or, the self-doubts come in, you know what, this isn't going to happen. I can't make this work. And the coach is there to kind of help you through and be your GPS. Like if you were going to go across the country, you would get into a dead end if we didn't have the Google Maps. That's what your coach is. It's like your Google Maps, and success leaves traces, as the success people like to say, and that's what mentors are for, is to help you look at the breadcrumbs and say, hey, this is what you should be doing. And so it takes away the fear, because the first thing we're going to fill in the blanks, right? Right away, it's like, well, I'm not making any money, those kind of things.
Yeah. Yeah. And coaches are so important for so many things. And there's different coaches for different things. So I had a coach that helped me do the ketogenic diet. Why? Because for 2 years I couldn't lose weight. I was, and no matter what I did, and I have a lot of nutritional background, but I couldn't do it by myself. I got a coach instantly. Hey, it started working. The same thing with podcasting. I went and I got someone to show me how to do that. And now I've been doing it a year, and I'm going to start teaching a podcasting course so that I can help other people. So you want to find someone who's done it before, and you have been up and down all around, in corporate, out of corporate, had those times where, you know what it feels like to not feel good enough, not feel adequate. But like you just said, we have it all in us.
And that's what great coaches do. They bring it out. If you're climbing Mount Everest, you need a guide. You know, the greatest athletes in the world, like LeBron James and Tiger Woods, you think those guys know what they're doing, but they still have coaches to get to that elite level. And it's not obviously to tell LeBron what to do. It's like to look at their form, right? Because golfers, it's a head game. And, you know, I don't know if you know, Tiger Woods went through a spell where he had some problems, and it's to analyze their swing, analyze, you know, just everything they do. And so that's what great coaches do. Mm-hmm. Coaches who call up and say, okay, Kimberly, what do you want to talk about today? That's not a coach. And you know, I should be guiding you and say, hey, you know, this is what I like to cover today. And so that's why it's important. And accountability, right? It's so accountability to keep you going. You know, I grew up wanting to be a baseball pitcher for the Cubs. I lived in Chicago, and everybody thought I was going to be a Cub pitcher. But the years went by, I flunked out of college, and, you know, first off, I had the loser mentality, like I said. Nowadays, kids have pitching coaches at 9 years old. They have quarterback coaches at 9 years old. You look at the gymnasts, I mean, 6 years old, they're starting. This doesn't happen by accident. They don't become Olympians and great people by accident. Now, they are fortunate to start when they're younger. You know, I started quite older, but the thing is, I have the wisdom that I didn't have when I was younger, and you have the wisdom. And so that is really the advantage. Where are the failures and the disappointments and the screw-ups and the bad relationship and jobs in the first half of life? And how are we going to use that wisdom to move forward in the second half of life and do the real work?
Exactly. And I think one thing that's really important is, as soon as you want to start changing, and especially if you want to do a radical change where, you know, like what you did, sometimes it's the people closest to us, our families, our friends, who are trying to protect us, that they don't want us to change. And also when we start changing, they're starting to get a little upset, because if we change, of course, they've got to change. And so I think having a community of people around you who are like-minded, who are on the same path, is helpful. And so why don't you talk about your Facebook group and how you started that and what it's for?
You know, Kimberly, you hit it right on. I want to address what you said first. Your social sphere is so important. And in the beginning, it's like a little incubator. You are in an incubator that, you know, you probably heard of these companies. They're called business incubators. You get the idea and help form it. And so that's your network when you start. And I like to use the analogy, you go to these workshops, or at least we did. You go to a 3-day workshop like a Tony Robbins or, you know, Brendan Burchard, you get all jazzed. And it's like, yeah, I'm gonna do this. And then you go home, and on Monday, you're back to the real world. And you're back to the same job. And these people, you know, it's like, why are you on a high, Joe? They don't understand. And your wife or spouse doesn't understand. And little by little, it dissipates, and you're back to the same life. And, you know, it's really so important. So the first time I lost my job, I had no network. This time, I built a community of like-minded people, such as yourself. Because I'm in coaching, I got together with a coaching community, and an author community, and a speaking community, just before I even built mine, because everybody has the same obstacles, the same fears. You know, when I did my first Facebook Live, I set it up for 2 hours or 3 hours. I had such anxiety. I would do it and look at the background and how do I look? And that's, I mean, it was insane. And, you know, now you just like do it. Right. But those are the fears. And I would ask people, hey, how do you do your Facebook Live and this kind of thing? But so I started my community, the Silver Linings Network, for people in the second half who could talk with others who are experiencing not just the same fears and obstacles and dreams, but also their successes. Hey, look at me. I wrote my first book at 62. or I left corporate and started a business at 57, and we want to share successes. And then, you know, I do trainings. I started what I call my VIP talks, which is like a TED talk, but it speaks on VIP, like vibrancy, impact, and purpose. Speakers over 40 talking on issues for people over 40. And, you know, they've just been amazing. I've had the best speakers talking 10 minutes on purpose, because they were 4 10-minute speakers. And then we record them live in the group. And then, you know, I record them and disseminate them. But you have to get the community going. And I'm still in the formative stage, but it's so great to just keep putting it out there. You can see I Cup of Joe. I do a Cup of Joe where, you know, I'll talk for 5 minutes, rant, whatever I do. And I'm taking it bigger for people who are near 50 that know the AARP, the American Association of Retired People. The silver linings, I see it as an adjunct to it. So the AARP is designed to get you from 50 years old to the grave. Yeah. You know, they're going to talk about finance and don't get scammed and insurance and all that. My organization is how do you live a vibrant, impactful, and purposeful life? And so that's really what the network is. And I'd love it if people want to join. You can just go to facebook.com/group/ the Silver Linings Network group, and you'll find it.
Wonderful. Yeah. So I encourage everybody to do that. And I believe I've already done that. And it's a wonderful group. And then you wrote a book, 7 Essential Virtues for Incredible Success. So virtues, what virtues are you talking about?
Well, that book actually came to me on an airplane. I was going to Palm Springs for a conference. And some years ago, I had a relationship end in Palm Springs. It was a bad relationship. And I was filled with such anxiety and bad feelings going into the city. And I didn't want to go. I said I wasn't going to go. Actually, the facilitator of the workshop even reached out to me, talked me into it. And the whole time I heard this little dog under, you know, what do they call it? The cargo. And there was a dog just barking the whole time. Arf, arf, arf. The entire, I think it was like a 90-minute trip. And it was driving me crazy. It was such a transformational event that when I left Palm Springs, it dawned on me that I was that dog barking. I was that dog resisting to go and complaining about the relationship and all that. And I was in such an enlightened state that book downloaded into me, not in the correct form, but I was thinking, what if we ate beans that can help us spiritually? And so as I started writing this book, I looked at over 100 attributes as to which one, and attributes and virtues, which ones were the most responsible for my transformation from the manager of how to an enlightened manager. And I came up with these 7 essential that I think most attributes and virtues come from. And I decided that if you had these 7, you would be an amazing leader and an amazing person. And so that book came out in 2018. And quickly, it's a story about a guy on Christmas Eve who lost everything, his family, his home, his career, his identity. And he meets a mysterious stranger who takes him on this journey of 7 rooms. And he gets these 7 essential virtues. And by the end of the night, his life is transformed. And so it's a parable. And I'm working with a director now to turn it into a movie. And actually, my children's book, The Bodacious Beans, is also based on this. It's got 7 beans in it as well. Little twisted for children, but same principle.
Okay. Well, you know, I love the way you use metaphors and the way you relate things to everyday things, because I think it's very helpful for people to understand, and also just to get what you're saying and remember it.
Yeah, I appreciate that. I do try to tell stories or little anecdotes because I do think people relate to them. And many people will have the same experience, and
Mm-hmm.
we may react differently, but that's where when I talk about taking 100% responsibility for your life, you know, we use, and Jack Canfield, I'm a Canfield trainer. Jack likes to say E plus R equals O. So we all have the same event, but the R, our reaction to it, it's what's going to determine our O, or the outcome.
Mm-hmm.
And to use another analogy for that, I went to New Orleans for my company for Hurricane Katrina, and we had stores that were wiped out there, and we had to do massive hiring, and I went there to help hire. And I want to tell you that I met people who had the same event, right? They were in the middle of a hurricane, and one person reacted to it that life is over because they've lost everything. And another person reacted to it that it's a sign for God, and I'm going to have a transformation in my life. So they had two different responses and two different outcomes. And it's the same way with this pandemic.
Mm-hmm.
We're all going through it, but how are you going to react? And how are you going to define and design your outcome? And that's the question that we should all be asking ourselves.
Yeah, because there's people who are thriving more, succeeding beyond their wildest dreams during this pandemic, where other people are staying at home in their little quiet, dark corner, just scared and doing nothing, frozen. So why be the person that's frozen in the corner? Come out and see what opportunities are there, because everything's changing. The whole landscape is changing. So there's so many possibilities now. So if you think of it as we're in a transition, not that we're stuck, but we're in a transition. And now there's all these roads or all these doors. Which one do I want to choose? Which one I want to start walking towards? It'll just change your whole perspective and how you feel about things.
Yeah, I heard Jack Canfield say the other day, it's not the new normal, it's the better normal. And what's great about this time is how the playing field has been leveled. Tony Robbins just had a webinar, or not a webinar, a conference over the internet, cost him $9 million. He did it first class. But the thing is that Tony was reduced to doing exactly what you and I are doing. He may have spent $9 million, but the thing is, everyone has a level playing field now. We could all talk on Zoom. We could all do workshops and coaching. And whatever your industry is, if you have a business, you could take your business online. And so, the big guys with the big money have had to come online, just like where the little people were. The guy with the online store. But the thing is, the online store is recession proof, as long as you keep going. And so it's funny that the Silver Linings was born during this pandemic, and the Silver Linings podcast was born during the pandemic, because we have to look for the silver linings in the pandemic. Mm-hmm. And what is your own silver lining? What are you looking at that you could look differently, you could tweak, that you could think about in a new way? I mean, think about the new things that families have come up with. Mm-hmm. Look at the education community have had to do things differently. Life is going to go on. Mm-hmm. And either you could be a leader or you could be a follower. And I say, architect your life and then build it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So how do people find that magic within that they can express outward?
Well, I think, one of the first things that you have to listen to the voice, like you asked earlier, by asking questions. What brings you joy? What would you like to do? What would you, I do an exercise. I ask people to put 10 things down they hate about themselves, which they want to put 20. And then I say, what are 10 things that you love about yourself? And they can't do it. They only, like, one or two are a struggle, right, Kimberly? Mm-hmm. But So that's a way to, what do you love about yourself? What is the joy? What do you love to do when you were a child before you were censored? Remember when you were 3 years old and you hold up a sheet of paper, Mommy, look what I did. You know, it was a mess, but we didn't know any better to censor us. You know, when people say they can't, and I got this a lot of times at work, I can't. And I said, if I gave you $1 million, can you find a way to do it? And they would say, well, yeah. I said, okay, let's pretend I gave you $1 million and let's go out and do it. I think people let the how stop them. And the how, the universe will show us the how after we believe enough in ourselves to take the first step. After we start moving, like Dorothy, right? The resources came. You know, the Tin Man came and the Scarecrow came. She didn't know how she was going to make it on the road. And then, you know, the Dorothy, the good witch, not the good witch, whatever her name was, appeared at the end and all that. But that is going to help us on the road. We are going to have people come, fortuitous acquaintances and circumstances. You're going to meet somebody, like you said, you kind of ease into it and trust the process. You know, the Indiana Jones, and remember that one movie where he walked off that mountain and there was a chasm between, and then when he stepped, he threw like rocks, and it kind of, that's the way it is with us. I mean, I got to tell you, leaving corporate jail, it was scary. I had a good income, but I was, you know, I do an exercise with an hourglass, and I use the hourglass because, you know, it's over here behind me. I don't know if you can see it. And when you look at the hourglass, and everything that's on the bottom is the past, right? It's gone. And yet we like to live in that past. And everything at the top, you know, when you see the hourglass, is the future. And then that little tiny thing in the middle where the sand is going through, that's the present. And when you look and see how fast that is going, that's what really got me into action, when I saw how fast the present was moving. And the scary thing is, and I do an exercise, I cover the top. And it's like, none of us know how much sand is left.
No, we don't.
You know what I mean? We get anxiety about it, but we don't know. You could have the big sand in the sky, and I could have the little sand, and so that's why you got to take action now. And that's really what the book is: love, compassion, tolerance, forgiveness, those kind of things that I think in this time and age of society, we really need.
So I'm going to go in the personal direction now. What gives you personally the most happiness and satisfaction in your life at this point?
Well, number one has to be the birth of my sons. It has been a difficult road. I tell you, it's been a difficult road, but to see them grow into young men and to not really know what they want to do. You know, you meet some young adults today and they just know what they want to do. And I think that's really a great thing. But my boys at 23, they still don't know what they want to do. And, you know, one knows he just got a degree and he wants to be in music. He makes songs and things like that. But as far as what's the career, he doesn't know. And the thing is, I'm all right with that. You know, some parents would be worried. But at 23, I moved and was homeless. I knew nothing. And they are like light years ahead of where I was at 23. These guys know, you know, they're technology gurus, and they're just so intelligent. And so that is the joy, that seeing where they're going to go with their life. They're on the road of awakening the magic, like Dorothy, and you know, to have no drugs, no alcohol, no, you know, they're just compassionate kids. That's my biggest joy.
Beautiful. Yeah. So if people actually wanted to connect with you, either if they were interested in coaching or your Facebook group, what's the best way for them to reach you?
Well, the Facebook group, like I said, facebook.com/group/Silver Linings Network Group, or joe@joeswinger.com. They could email me, or they can go to joeswinger.com. There's a form there. But either way, if they want to get like the 45-minute free planning session, or just reach out and, give me feedback on where you are and what spoke to you on this podcast. I'd love to chat with you. I'm going to be doing a book coaching group where I'm going to help people in the second half of life finally get that book written. Like everybody has a book in them, and we got to get it out there, because the graveyards are full of people with books that were never written, and businesses that were never created, and messages that never were sent to the world, and we owe it to our brothers and sisters out there to get their message out there.
Yeah, beautiful, and I totally agree with that. Don't die with your gifts inside you.
Absolutely, that is the worst thing.
Yeah.
I like what Bob Proctor said: live full and die empty. You should be arriving on your deathbed with that gas tank on empty, because you have given everything you had to life. And you don't want to be surrounded by your talents and your creativity and your skills, and saying, we came to you and you never used us, and now we're dying with you. I mean, I hope this hasn't been a downer.
Oh, no,
Because
no.
I know I've gotten sad a few times.
Yeah, but it's so true. And, that's, one of the main reasons I have my podcast. I want people to be inspired by people like you who to go out and find out what that is. So,
And give themselves permission. If anyone is listening today, Joe Swinger is giving you permission to go out and transform yourself and take it one step at a time, because we just do not give ourselves permission. It's like, I can't do it, or I don't, like you said, you become a different person. And so your relationships have to become different. And you know what that tells you? You have to get different relationships. And I've really expanded my network, and I made an effort. So I joke about it. I say I'm the dumbest one in the group. I used to be the smartest one, but now I just associate with exceptional people like yourself, and that keep lifting me up.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much for being on the podcast today. And I've learned so much from you, and you've just been so inspiring. So thank you so much, Joe.
Hey, this has been great, Kimberly, and I'd love to chat with you again sometime.
Yeah. So I have one last question before we get off the podcast. What is your best advice on living an incredible, amazing life?
I think day-to-day living with joy and gratitude, living the VIP life of living a vibrant morning and life and relationship, waking up, with, you can't wait to get going on the day, no matter what you're doing, and gratitude. We have a phenomenon going in the sky now. You could see Mars, you could see Jupiter, you could see Saturn. And I was out there, in fact, right now we're in a meteor shower. And it brings you chills to think that you could just see those planets. And I was in such a state of gratitude, just, being in my beautiful yard. And if you could wake up every day and list, 5 things in a gratitude journal, or just some kind of journaling, or yoga, or exercise. Like I do an hour exercise of kickboxing every day. Start with some kind of ritual, because 99% of people who are successful start with the morning ritual. And it just impacts your entire day. And if you can begin with that, you're going to have a heck of a day, and a week and a month and pretty soon you're gonna have a beautiful life.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. And we'll talk to you again soon.
Okay, thank you.